Welcome to Veritas. This is the Veritas. Welcome to Timbecon Live. Tonight's special guest is Gary Rowland. Good idea.
What just happened?
I fixed it.
What, everything?
Yeah?
That's pretty good, eh?
Yeah? Social distancing!
My name's John Madden. Welcome to Timbecon Live.
This is Timbecon Live, starring Mr. Routerbits himself, Patrick Holcombe, the man with no need for beard envy, Phil Shinbein, and our resident Albert Einstein impersonator and all-round good guy, Mr. Gary Rizzolo. And now here's our host, John Madden.
Welcome to Timbecon Live. We're here tonight in the Timbecon shed, out in the middle of nowhere, away from any nasty influences. We have here in our studio tonight, we have Patrick Holcombe, the one and only. Thanks for coming out, Patrick.
I had nothing better to do.
Over here we've got Phil Shinbein, all the way from Canada. Phil, how's that beard going?
Pretty good, pretty good.
Yeah,
nice and oily, nice and greasy. It's got some pizza in it from earlier.
I hear something about canola. Anyway, we'll talk about that later. And over there we've got our special guest again, Gary Rizzolo. Gary, how are you keeping?
Very well, and thank you for having me.
Oh, mate, it's always a pleasure to have you in the studio. We've got a whole special evening tonight planned on focusing on sharpening. Patrick, I believe you're taking us through diamond stones.
Yeah, and I'll have a quick look at the Veritas MkII jig as well for sharpening.
Okay, nice piece of kit. Phil, you're doing water machines, what do they call them? Wetstone grinders?
Something like that, yeah. And I'm also going to try and keep my beard out of the spindle and not pull my face into it.
I heard you had a bit of an accident there one time.
Is that what's wrong with your face?
Yeah, that's why I grew the beard, to cover the scars. Thanks.
He's very sensitive about this. And Gary, I believe that you're being the craftsman that you are, you'll be showing us honing and stropping techniques, yes?
Yes, I will. I'll definitely do that.
Good. I always enjoy a good stropping. It's to get an edge up. So stay with us tonight while we show you what we can share with you about sharpening, and hopefully we'll learn something and have a bit of fun on the way. And if you're wondering at all about the shower curtains over here that's separating, I guess, obviously we are encouraging safe practices during this COVID-19 period. So we installed some showers, and in the name of good hygiene, we created somewhat of I call it a shower block to keep everyone separated. Hey, you guys all, Gary, how do you feel over there in your little cubicle?
It's good. It's working. I feel kind of safe.
Okay, nice. Safe from Phil, probably. Yeah, because I can see Patrick is slowly moving the curtain forward. Anyway, let's not crap on about that too much. I've brought in my little kit of water stones, which is looking pretty dismal compared to some of the other guys. I've got my 800 grit Japanese stone, which has been soaking for about half an hour now. And I have my 1200 grit Japanese water stone that's also been soaking. I have a 6000 grit water stone, which is pretty flat, that we might have a quick look at that. And I'm going to attempt to flatten the back of this Narex chisel that's been kicking around the showroom for some time now here in Timbecon.
It's the one that you let customers play with, right?
Yeah, this is the one that customers play with. We love our customers, and sometimes they play with them a little bit too hard, so we have to bring them back from the edge, so to speak.
Yeah. That's also the one that I did this with, by the way. Just my DNA is on that one,
okay.
So be careful.
All right, so the important thing about using a water stone to flatten any kind of cutting tool is to make sure, A, that the water stone is flat. There's a lot of techniques on how to do this. People, I believe, glue sandpaper to glass. Do any of you guys do that?
I've seen it done.
Have done.
Yeah. I don't do it anymore because I have a diamond plate, but it is a way that people do it.
Yeah. Well, I thought for a long time that I was the only person who uses a diamond stone to flatten a waterstone, and I would secretly say that that's the only thing that good diamond stones are actually good for, is flattening waterstones, but you're not meant to say that out loud. So in order to get this stone, and it's done a little bit of work, this is my 800 stone, which is a good starting point to flatten any chisel. What I'll do is just set it up on my stone, on my diamond stone, and just run it back and forward. And you can see straight up that this stone's not perfectly flat. I don't know if you can catch that on camera, but there's a high point here and a high point there, because I've been sharpening something else there. So if I go ahead and try to flatten the back of this chisel on this waterstone, I will fail. So let's go on with flattening it.
It's good to be comfortable with failure, though. It's good to be comfortable with failure.
This is the critical thing to get that waterstone flat in order to get the back of your chisel flat.
Right.
It's very important. It's the crux of the matter. It has to be flat because that's your datum or your datum. It's your point of reference.
Right.
In order to sharpen it, you've then got to take an angled cut in order to create a point. And you won't get a point if that back of the blade is not flat.
Right. Fantastic.
Another way I've seen that you can figure out that you've got your stone flat is if you draw some really light grey lead pencil lines across it.
Right.
You can see if there's any low points still left, because they show up more easily than, like if your stones are clean, sometimes it's hard to see where the high points still are.
Yeah.
So, you know, just a pencil line on the stone, a scribble, means you can always see if there's bits that you've missed.
It's like the old sanding trick.
Yeah, exactly. Use a pencil on a piece of wood and use it for a hand plane too. So when you take your blow or take your pass across the wood, where the pencil line remains is the low point. I ordinarily would keep my stones dry, so it's unusual for me to have them wet like this. So it's much easier to flatten them. Do you keep your stones flat?
I wet
dry?
them, mostly. Keep them dry and then wet them as I use them.
Right.
Do you flatten them wet or flatten them dry?
Flatten them wet.
Me too.
Do you find that works better?
I've never tried it dry. It's just by the time I get around to flattening them, they're already wet because I've already, I've started using them usually,
okay.
and then find that I need to. Invariably, I need to flatten them during the sharpening process if I'm doing a few. Yeah,
well, that's true. Waterstones will naturally go out of shape because the fact that they dissolve while you're using them, so to speak, is how they work. It's that slurry that actually cuts the metal. So I've flattened this stone up. For me, I would ordinarily polish or flatten the back of the chisel up to about 6,000 grit. So 800, 1,200, 6,000. What do you guys normally do the backs of your chisels to?
So I guess it depends on what you're using it for. And, obviously there's as many different ways to sharpen a chisel as there are people. And you've got to find your own comfortable way of sharpening.
Yeah.
If you're just cutting a mortise, you probably don't need to go anywhere past 6,000.
Yeah.
If you're doing very fine pairing work or mitering, like I do a lot with my guitar making, then you need to go to a much higher grit, 12,000, 16,000, because you want that polished face so you can see the reflection when you're working.
Yeah.
So it's horses for courses in a way.
Yeah. Well, most of the work that I do these days anyway is just sort of general bench work in my little shed at home. So 6,000 is the number that I'm going for. So
that's generally where I end up too.
Yeah, it's a good solid fit. It's sharp. It's not guitar sharp, so it's or Rizzolo sharp, but it is sharp enough for John Madden and
pressure.
Patrick Holcombe. Flattening the back, if you've got like nothing to do on a Sunday and you've got a new CD or a bit of vinyl that you want to listen to, put it on and then start sharpening chisels if you're going to use Waterstones. It's quite a meditative process. I think it's a good opportunity to tune your mind into what you're about to do from a craft perspective. So I think hand sharpening chisels is a very key skill. It's not just about getting a sharp chisel, it's about sharpening the mind as well. But
It's a great way to procrastinate from a job that you should be doing.
It's a good way to get away from a screaming baby.
Yeah, we've all had those. So what I do is I generally put this finger here as the leader finger. That runs along, so you only need to flatten probably, in my opinion, the first 30 millimetres. So I use that, and then I use my thumb on the other side, and I just push back and forward like so. Now, a lot of you people watching this tonight will be very familiar with this process, but it does surprise me how many people don't understand how important it is to flatten a chisel first before you sharpen it, yeah? So,
And I guess we should stress the point that even if it's a brand new chisel, it may not necessarily be flat.
Yeah, it's almost guaranteed not to be.
Yeah. And that, your expectation of where the chisel is will only be realised once you start flattening it.
yeah. Well, these Narex chisels are manufactured in the Czech Republic. I don't own Narex personally. I use filed chisels in Switzerland, and I've always been very happy with those chisels. These have been in the Australian market, I think, for the last 6-7 years approximately.
That set are the ones that I use.
Yeah.
That exact set. They're great.
I have some as well. I really like them.
Yeah, I've got the set of 6. That's my main work chisel.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me the file are a little bit more elegant, and I'm used to them. But the steel in the Narexes is excellent, and you've got to always remember that Czech Republic is in the same vicinity. That's how I think about it. Vicinity as Germany in the world. So out of that part of Europe is where a lot of tool making and quality steel manufacture happens. So I think that the Czech Republic is emerging from previous times when they weren't on the world scene for tool making, but they definitely are backed with this product.
I checked out their website the other day, actually.
Get it?
It's insane.
Checked.
Yeah.
I don't get that. I shot the curtain.
Yeah, and they do all kinds of random tools. They just do everything you ever think of. Yeah.
Yeah, right.
It's
Yeah,
huge.
they do knives, carving tools, cutter blades,
Yeah.
screwdrivers.
Oh,
Screwdriver.
yeah.
I love those screwdrivers. I went through like a couple of weeks when I was around here. Every time I came in, I bought one just because.
Yeah.
It's like a $20 screwdriver. It's excessive, but nice.
No, they're
They
very,
look cool.
very good.
And I've been to part of the work I do with Timbecon and other companies I work for. We go to Europe and meet with the owners, and I've met the owners of Narex a couple of times now. A lovely guy called Philippe runs the business,
Good name.
and young guy, family business. I think they've owned the business for like 60, 70 years. Don't quote me on that, but statistics are made up on the spot, obviously. But Narex.
I bought a 2 cherries chisel from here, from Timbecon, a little 1/2-inch one, and it is a superb chisel.
The cherries are German, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah. Kirschen?
Kirschen.
Those Germans, they know how to make good steel. There's still a little high point here in the middle, probably a low point there where it's shiny, but what you're looking for is the dull grey all across with no shiny points, and that'll tell you that the chisel's flat, yeah.
Sometimes, if I need to, I'll start on a diamond plate.
Yeah, okay.
If it's really beat up, or if it's an old plane, like an old blade or an old chisel, and there's pits on it that need to be removed, then I start at something way coarser.
What course, what grit?
250 if I have to.
Wow.
Yeah.
I've been sacked because Gary says I'm too slow, so
No.
let me clean up for you, sir. Yeah. But yeah, let's show. Yeah, this is great. Show us.
So I have a slightly different grip. The point is to get the thing flat. How you end up holding it, it's up to you to develop your personal kind of way of doing it. But it is critical to get the back of this chisel flat. And
Are you saying that I can't be trusted, Gary?
no, I'm not saying that at all. I just felt for you working away there for hours.
we asked the audience in the last couple of emails that went out to our email list, of course, to contribute some questions. And I've got a few questions here, and we've even got a video question that we'll play later. But we've got an email from Jim here from Brunswick who asks, can I use sandpaper? Gary, this is good for you to answer, I think. Can I use sandpaper glued to a board to flatten the back of my chisels? And if so, what grade paper would you suggest?
Okay. First of all, don't use a board. You need to use a piece of glass or a piece of granite or stone that is dead flat. Glass is probably the best. And then you can use some spray adhesive and glue down some wet and dry. Use wet and dry, don't use sandpaper. And maybe start with a fairly coarse grit, like 320, 350, around that area. Move up to 600, move up to 1,000.
Okay.
And by the time you've got to your 1,000, you better hope you've got your back flat like we're doing here on this 800.
I would imagine that sandpaper wouldn't take the amount of grinding that you're doing right now. Like if you had spent 10 minutes on some wet and dry sandpaper, by this point it would be pulp, right? It'd be gone. Or
The paper, yeah.
or the grit would be...
You use it wet.
Yeah, of course.
Use it wet and...
And if you start at 320, 350, whatever, you're gonna take off so much.
One,
Yeah.
5 minutes on the 600, and you should be there. And then you could come to the Waterstone. So really, you're only using that coarse paper on glass to get a quick flattening of a bad chisel.
Sort of like what I do with diamond stones.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
So you're not replacing a Waterstone. You're doing it for those initial... Yeah.
Exactly. You can go all the way if you don't have all the stones. You could buy lots of different...
A whole bunch of
grits.
wet and dry
Yes,
sandpaper.
Yeah, you could. But you're better off with the diamond stone and some good Japanese stones.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you could use the sandpaper glued to a piece of glass to flatten the Japanese stone.
Yes.
So,
Well, flatten any... yeah,
Anything
you could
you need.
flatten the stone, flatten any chisel. Yeah, indeed.
I actually use sandpaper, like lots of sandpaper, on a piece of glass to true up the edges of my drum shells. It's the same thing. Anything you need to be perfectly flat, glass is where it's at.
Yes.
Yeah. The thicker the piece of glass you can find, the better. Because if it's not sitting on something particularly flat and you're putting pressure on it, you can actually snap the glass.
You have a piece of window glass. You
want
go to the glass supplier and see if he's got a bit of 10 mil off cut.
well, my wife's got a lovely 10 mil thick glass coffee table. Maybe I could
Oh, you can watch TV?
whack a bit of sandpaper on that, see how that goes down.
Good
Yeah.
idea. Wait till she goes out.
Yeah.
The
Well,
bench
she's
in
not
my
allowed to, yeah,
kitchen is
yeah.
perfectly flat for some weird, strange reason. I actually checked it with like a big old, perfectly flat. I don't know. Yeah.
Granite?
I don't know what the hell it's. It looks like granite, yeah, but it's perfectly flat. That's why
Is
I
it
test
heavy?
all my bearing edges on. I don't know. It's bolted to the floor.
Oh, thanks. You are finished, Gary?
There you go.
Excellent. Now, this is only ground to 800 grit. Thank you, Mr. Rizzolo. Gary's kindly, because it looks like I was about to pass out, so Gary's kindly stepped in and ground this back of this chisel to 800 grit. There's a little bit more required there, I think, but for the purposes of tonight's demonstration, I think everyone understands the process of flattening the back. And from here, you would go to your 1200, 6000, and wherever you want to go with the backs of your chisel. So,
And the reason this one has required so much is because it was messed up.
Yeah.
Because people have been messing around with it.
yeah, that's a good point, Patrick.
Like off the shelf, it would not require that much work. It's always worth touching them up, but
Yeah.
you're never going to need. I would not expect that you would need that much work.
That's right, and also you really only need sort of that forward. You know, some people have come to us and said, "Well, I want to get the whole back of a chisel flat." Well, good luck with that. But a chisel like Narix, any of the main brands will require some flattening and then sharpening and honing before you can use them. So we've flattened this to an adequate level. Patrick here is going to step in now and take us through grinding a bevel using the MkII sharpening jig by Veritas on diamond stone. So over to you, Patrick.
Thank you, John. Hi everybody, thanks John. I'm going to go through the process that I use to sharpen all my chisels and also my flattening blades. I do, first of all, do the flattening of the back and the flattening of the stones. That is key to the whole process. But then I move over to the MkII, which is a jig from Veritas, which lets you set very specific angles and retain those angles as you are sharpening your chisel. So when I started out, for a year or more, I tried to get myself to the point where I could maintain a perfect bevel on the stone by hand. And I was okay at it. But then, actually, it was at a Timbecon event, very early days. Someone held a square up to the edge of my chisel, and it was not square.
Is that like that film Reality Bites?
Yeah. So it was sharp, and I was able to use them. And maybe it doesn't matter too much if they're not square, but for some stuff it really does. And from that point on, I actually went and started using one of these because the lack of consistency was hurting my ego. So, I have a diamond.
So fragile.
Oh, he's a woodworker.
I have a diamond plate, which I use to flatten my stones. I have this combo stone here tonight, which is a 1000 and a 6000. For general work, this is all I use, and then I'll generally take this to a strop as well, a leather strop, if I want that extra polish. But these two stones do most of the work for me. So
I had one of those two-sided stones in the past, and they're fantastic because it's so convenient. You know,
right there.
Yeah.
This is the first and only Waterstone I've ever bought.
Yeah.
And I've used it for years, and it's just getting thinner and thinner. But
I was going to say it looks a bit...
Yeah, it's a little on the anemic side.
It's getting adorable.
And I have also carved with a sharp implement into the side here what the grits are, because otherwise I would forget.
Oh, yeah. Well, I write on the sides in Texter, but it washes off! Anyway.
Okay.
I would just write dull on one side and like less dull on the other.
The MkII by Veritas is a very handy jig, and there are a ton of videos that will take you through really clear step-by-step process of how you would use it, but I'm just going to quickly go through what is involved. Basically, what it allows you to do is place your chisel into this jig to a certain depth, which is set by this stop, and that stop is referencing a certain angle. So I know that all of my chisels are set for 30 degrees. Whatever angle that you're looking for, it's referenced here on this plate, and you just have to move this little stop into that correct position.
Random question for you.
Yeah.
The angle.
Yeah.
Right? 25, 30, whatever it is.
Mm.
What makes you decide? Hold on.
Why would you choose
which angle and why?
I know,
essentially.
Gary, you said for fine pairing work, you'd go with a much finer angle.
Indeed. 25 degrees is what I would call a pretty acute angle, and I use that for pairing.
It weakens, don't you feel that it weakens the chisel a little?
Well, if you're belting a chisel, you're cutting dovetails or using the chisel for everything else but pairing, then 30 degrees is better.
Yeah.
But in general, I'd say a good rule of thumb for everyone is grind at 25 degrees, and you can either hone at that same 25 degrees or hone at 30 degrees.
You mean set that micro bevel?
The second bevel, yes.
Yeah.
The honing bevel.
Yeah.
So you got your grinding bevel and then your honing bevel.
And when you're saying honing, you're referring to you've taken your chisel off a rotary whetstone grinder.
Yes.
And then you're honing that by hand on a stone.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
And
Sure.
You're changing the angle.
Like a secondary bevel.
Your secondary bevel.
At 30 degrees.
30.
Yeah, okay.
So
have you ever sharpened your chisels to 20 degrees? For
Not
certain
20,
pairing?
if for some, although that little 2 cherries chisel I was talking about, I believe I have that at about 22.
Oh, okay, yeah.
So it's a lot finer.
Right.
Because that is a real paring tool.
Yeah.
So would you adjust the angle if you're going to be doing a ton of like super hard stuff or like super softer timbers? Like would that affect it at all?
You know what? For hard timber, you want a sharp chisel. For soft timber, you want a sharp chisel.
Yeah. No,
Guess what? You want a sharp chisel.
Yeah, right. Okay.
Do you have a pairing set of chisels, and do you have like one set at 25 and one set at 30?
Yeah, that's a good question, yeah.
Good. It is a good question. I don't, because I don't do much in the way of belting a chisel with a mallet.
Yeah.
Right.
A lot of my work is by hand. It's driving the chisel by hand.
Yeah.
And you got to sharpen, rather than sharpening 6 chisels constantly, you've now got a dozen to deal with. So just get it right. Yeah.
And also when I'm grinding, I just find that 25-degree angle, I can set it up easy.
Yeah.
For the
absolutely.
You know, once I have the water wheel set up, then I'll mark it the length that it's sticking out of the jig.
Nice.
And then put everything in at that point so I don't have to change anything and it's all 25 degrees.
Yeah.
So you don't use an MkII?
I have one. I use it sometimes, but not all the time.
Okay.
And I don't have a Wetstone grinder. And if I did, then maybe this wouldn't have such a big role in my sharpening process.
Yeah, fine-tuning the honing process or the sharpening process. And as we're all in agreement that we're all going to do it differently.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, yeah, I mean,
But the end result is flat back, a set angle gives you a sharp point.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So this chisel is already fairly sharp. It hasn't been dropped yet, which is a natural part of every one of my chisels' life.
That yet is all caps. It's a different color.
It hasn't been dropped yet since I last sharpened it. In its life, it has been dropped. But
do you ever have that instinct to stick your foot out? No.
I'd rather hit my leather shoe than go straight into it. So I don't need to run this chisel over my diamond plate. This one is really coarse. It's a 250 and 600, but it's also really old. So if you feel this 250, it feels really smooth. I'm only saying that because it does get used for resetting bevels if you've dropped the chisel or you've done something to it. I have a chisel over there that's got a very clear nick in the tip. I can't remember exactly what the moment was, but I can remember the feeling of when it hit that.
It's like a shattered pane of glass.
Yeah.
It'll need to be that angle will need to be reset, probably on the 250, or ideally, I might even just hand it to you when you're doing the Whetstone grinder and get you to reset that completely because it has a distinct V in it, which is no bueno.
I don't like sharpening other people's chisels.
Oh, you can sharpen
It's scary.
A lot of pressure.
Yeah, right? I have no problem stuffing up my own chisels. It doesn't bother me in the
And
slightest.
people who want to sharpen your chisels, sharpen your chisels it's like a control thing. It's like, no, it's like the barbecue.
Yeah,
you
my
know?
barbecue,
Stay
my
away.
sausages.
Yeah.
Another really cool thing about the MkII is it has this little dial on the side which allows you to set a micro bevel. So I'm going to do the setting of my main angle at 30 degrees with this little dial pointing upwards, and I'll take that to 6,000, and then I'll adjust this little dial so it's facing downwards. And what that actually does is it's raising the chisel upwards ever so slightly, which is allowing me to then sharpen just the very tip or create a micro bevel, and I'll do that at a much higher, at the highest level of grit I have, which is 6,000, and then I'll take it over to my strop. I'm ready to set that first bevel. Now, I'm not having to set the angle from scratch because I'm just going back to the same angle that I'm always using on this chisel. I'm just resurfacing it. In the same way that John was doing with the back of the chisel, I'm starting with a coarser grit and moving up. As this is not too blunt, I'm going to start with 1,000 and then go to 6,000, and then I'm going to reset this little micro bevel dial and set a micro bevel at 6,000, Then I'll make sure there's no burr on the back and take it to the strop. You want to keep even pressure on the front of the blade. I like to square my body to the stone to make sure that I'm not changing the pressure too much in the action that I'm doing. It's easy to do all kinds of weird things as you're moving back and forth, and then makes less difference with this jig because the jig is holding it so straight. But certainly when you're doing that stuff by hand, if you don't have your joints all locked in, the chisel ends up doing all kinds of weird scallopy things.
True.
So you're just trying to keep really nice and straight.
Turn my body to the stone. I feel like I'm in a Stevie Ray Vaughan music clip.
You need to just have a look at the surface that you're grinding and make sure that it is cutting and it is nice and even. And you can generally see that you've got a nice even finish along that edge. So the 1000... Sorry, Gary, go ahead.
I was going to say, do you feel the back of the chisel and just feel that you've got a little burr?
Yeah, absolutely. You can, if you're only getting that on one side, it's something's not going right.
That's your tell. As soon as you got the burr, you're done.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. But don't you want a nice big shiny flat bevel, you know? You can show your friends and...
Yeah. You do. You do that as well. That should be there already.
Of course.
The operative word being should.
Okay, so that face is looking good, very consistent. I can just feel that very, very fine burr on the backside. I'm going to then take this up to 6,000.
Well, you don't muck about, do you, eh?
Nope. I mean, it was already pretty sharp.
Yeah, okay.
So,
is that the same Naru's chisel? No, it's a different one. Yeah, okay. Oh, this is your chisel.
no one.
I'll just be quiet now. Yeah.
And then once I'm satisfied that it's been polished at the 6,000 level, then I'm going to move that micro adjust knob just so I can take off the very, very leading edge there, and I'm able to make sure that that is just as sharp as can be. Do you find that do you think I'm wasting my time by grinding this to 6,000, then moving the bevel up and doing that at 6,000?
If you've got a burr on the back, then I would say you're done.
Yeah, okay.
You can, and again that comes back to, are you going to be hitting it with a mallet? If you are hitting it with a mallet, maybe you need the secondary bevel.
I'm thinking I might just drop this one straight on the concrete floor.
Catch it with your foot.
But isn't the advantages of a secondary bevel? It's not about being sharper. It's about having less edge to maintain.
Yeah, well, I guess, but in this case, he's got a really good surface, angled surface at 6,000 grit, and that flat area has created a burr on the back. So he's done, really. He's done. But but that again, we were talking about how that very fine pointed edge can be brittle. If you're using the chisel with a mallet, then you've got a little brittle edge, and maybe the secondary bevel will create less of a point and therefore a stronger edge that you can work away.
It's slightly less acute, that angle on there.
But you're right, the secondary bevel is for the next time you sharpen that chisel.
Yeah.
So you've used it, it goes blank. Sorry, Phil.
Yeah, no, I've just, we've kind of skipped something here. This might make me sound like the biggest idiot ever, but the micro bevel, right? Is it, like say this is the flat bottom, is it like this angle's going down and then it's in this way, or is it coming, coming back up that way? It's this and then that.
It's two bevels.
Yeah, so your primary bevel say 25 degrees, and you add a secondary micro bevel at 30 degrees.
Right.
And the MkII has a little setting for that.
7 degrees.
It's got a little setting that just does it for you automatically. Yeah.
This is actually a perfect segue into our question from Denise in the ACT. Hey Denise, thank you for emailing us. Denise asks, some people promote the the use of a micro bevel on the back of the chisel,
Back bevel,
on a back bevel.
which is kind of what you were asking.
Yeah.
Okay. This is not something you do with a chisel.
Yeah.
Let's make this very clear.
Yeah.
Do not put a bevel on the back of your chisel.
Yeah.
Keep your chisels dead flat on the back and the grind angle on the other side of 25 degrees.
Yeah. Okay.
What you're talking about is a method of sharpening plane blades.
Oh, look at that.
And
I do not.
there is a method that seems to be getting a lot of airplay. It's one that I understand, but that I can't bring myself to do it because I've spent many years flattening the backs of plane blades, and I just don't want to disturb it. But what it is actually grinding or honing a slight another bevel on the back.
I have a back
So-
bevel on this.
So you have a
Throw it away immediately.
flat
Throw it on the floor.
No, I think it works.
Put it on the
I think
wall.
it works for you on planes.
Yeah.
And if you want to go that way, good. If you've got a troublesome blade that you can't get flat, then that method is the answer.
And that is why this
Why
one has a
you've done
back bevel, is because this is a
And-
beat up old thing and I couldn't get it flat.
So, Denise, I hope that answers your question about back bevels.
Yeah.
Yes, for plane blades, generally speaking.
No
No,
for
for chisels.
Absolutely.
All right,
And why
so-
is that, John? Why wouldn't we do it on a chisel?
I wouldn't do it on either personally, but I guess I can't answer that question.
Because when you're pairing something, you're not going to get a flat
cut,
surface,
yeah.
are you?
Oh, that was good.
You're going to
You're not going to be on that line that you think you're on.
your chisels, your cut line's going to be above the back of your chisels.
Okay, so
I've got my secondary bevel.
yeah,
I can feel a very slight burr. So now I'm going to go back, make sure this is flat.
It is very wise to constantly flatten your water stones.
It's
Yeah.
incredible how fast these
They
go
wear
out.
very quickly, and it's
Yeah.
a lesson that took me a long time to learn.
yeah.
Would it
and
make sense to kind of rotate the thing? Because I notice almost everybody is going diagonally on the stone from like this corner to that corner, right? If you rotate it every now and again and you'd make
Yeah.
like an X
When I was
pattern.
using this, I
Yeah.
was doing that end, then flipping it
Yeah.
around, doing that end.
Or you can go off depending on the width of
Yeah.
the chisel. Yeah.
Yeah.
But this, I'll just do a couple of passes on the back to make sure that burr is gone.
I like how you pulled it back first.
Yeah, you don't want to fold that wire under the nice edge that you've just created.
Yeah.
Good point.
Now this has already been done fairly recently, so it doesn't need a ton of work. But that's looking shiny. So now it will go onto my leather strop.
Which is kept off camera.
Yep. I'll let Gary go into this in greater detail, but as he mentioned to me earlier, around 20 passes on both faces. So 10 on the back.
Yeah. Well, I go in groups of 10 because I can only count to 10.
Twice.
Turn your toes.
Yeah. I can only count to 21 if I'm naked.
And then you want to make sure, because you're not using
It's
the
a half, really. 20 and a half.
Is
Sorry.
it? Are we having fun? No.
No. We're not allowed to have fun.
No, no.
Get back in your shower.
I'm going to keep going.
Yeah.
I want to teach these poor people something.
And where did you get that strop from, Gary?
I made it myself.
You made it yourself,
Yeah,
yeah.
look, I know you can buy them. This is a piece of American oak, because I'm
Yeah.
fancy like that,
Yeah.
and just a nice chunk of like 4mm leather, full grain
What
leather.
species of leather?
Definitely cow.
Cow leather.
Absolutely.
When you are stropping on the actual bevel that you've just created, you want to make sure that you're running at that angle that you just set. If you're too steep, you're just going to be taking that edge right off. If you're too shallow, you're going to be polishing the heel, but not the actual tip. So set that as best you can.
Yeah.
Maintain that angle. and don't do the thing where you're bringing the chisel up as you're coming through. I'll do that a couple more times because otherwise Gary will yell at me.
You're not doing it right. Yeah, something like that. I'm surprised you haven't stepped in yet. Here he comes.
Groups of 20. Or 21 if you take
21 and a half. All right,
That's an
sweet.
inappropriate joke I should stop making.
What about?
All right, that'll do for me. Now,
What about setting a bevel from essentially scratch with the Mark II? Does it take forever to do?
depends how much material you have to remove. If say
Look
you've
at that
got,
chisel.
if you're trying, say you wanted to take a chisel that had been set at 25 and you wanted to get it to 30, or vice versa, I would recommend trying to take it to a friend with a whetstone grinder.
Absolutely.
If you have to truly take off a chunk of metal,
Yeah.
you can do it on this, but you'd want to use a really aggressive diamond plate.
That 24 grit we found in the corner.
Yeah, or maybe this 250 when it was new, and you can get rid of a lot of material. But you just got to remember, those are deep scratches, and you're just gonna, you're gonna have to keep going through them to get rid of them.
Grinding
Sorry.
grinding is paramount, really. I mean, you need to start off with a ground bevel of some description. Now, in the old days, before we just used dry stones, right?
Yeah.
And you would spend a lot of time dipping your chisel in water to keep it cool, so you could just grind carefully so you didn't blue the end of your chisel and lose the temper.
Yeah.
But look, these days the whetstone grinders are very affordable, and
Especially here at Timbecon.
yeah, had we had
Nice.
them, had we had
like
them,
that.
we would have used them in the old days.
Yeah, for sure.
Me, young guy like me, saying the old days. I remember.
You're very handsome, Gary. But I'd say the very key feature of the MkII is that the fact that you can return to whatever bevel you've set, like say ground oil, which is 25 degrees, go away on a holiday for 6 years if you're allowed to leave the country, come back and you can still set it back to 25
And
degrees.
you shouldn't have to take off a ton of material.
No,
That's exactly where it
it's
was.
set up,
And it stays straight, or it stays perpendicular to the jig. Because of this guide holds it perpendicular. So you're not doing it this angle one time and then 6 years later you come back and doing it that angle and taking off a whole bunch more material. It just stays straight.
Yeah. Good. Oh no! Oh, look at that! Oh, furry. Your arm's very bald, isn't it?
I'm
Yeah.
I don't think they
Chisel
try this at home.
Don't try that at home. Yeah.
Another
You see the bandage on his finger already.
couple of ways to test for sharpness. I know you guys have your own tricks. We talked about this the other day.
Yeah.
The fingernail test.
Yeah.
If it catches on your fingernail, you obviously don't try and cut through your fingernail. That's not the idea. But also, just a piece of A4 paper. If you go into the top edge and it just tears it, then it's not very sharp. But
It's like a good party trick.
you
Yeah.
should be able to just like slice through.
Yeah. If it should be more like you're just parting the paper into two pieces than actually cutting it.
Yeah.
Anyway,
All right.
that's me done.
Phil, you're up.
Thanks, Patrick.
Sweet. Now I need power.
Right, thanks for that, Patrick. Great demonstration. Now we have a special treat. We've got Phil all the way from Canada who's going to be showing us how to use a whetstone grinder. But first, a word from our sponsors.
Straight off the bat, you might have noticed that my beard is now in safety mode, as well as my super fancy eyeball protection. Prescription safety glasses, by the way, as an aside, is a fantastic investment. Probably one of the best investments I ever made. But I put my beard up because anytime you're playing with anything that is spinning, you need to not have hair dangling over it, or else you will make some fairly gnarly face soup quite quickly, which would be bad. So, to get going with this machine, the first thing you do, you take your chisel and you put it in the correct jig. There are many available. This is the one for doing chisels, right? There are these 2 points here. You use those to register the chisel against so that it's absolutely square and whatnot. And you tighten up this one first and then this one, right? If you tighten up this one first, this will be on an angle in the jig. And that's the last thing you ever want, because that will mangle that.
Hey Phil, how tight do you have to tighten those knobs?
Tight enough that it's not going to go anywhere. In theory, if it's too loose, it can slide around as it's getting some friction here. Yeah.
Have you ever found it wobbles around, or it's
No, but I mean, I tend to be fairly pedantic with stuff like this, and I really crank it down so it's not going anywhere, because in the back of my head, I'm always paranoid that it's going to go flying out and hit the wall and bounce back in the, and then
Face soup, yeah.
yeah, face soup, neck soup this time. Yeah.
And how did you decide how far forward to put the chisel in that jig?
Yeah, I generally set it the furthest forward, I guess, that I can, just because it's easier to get the angle this way, right? You know, as you go long enough, and this gets, the more you sharpen it, the shorter it gets, the more difficult it becomes. But generally, it's not entirely, it doesn't matter all that much how far into the jig you go, because you're going to set the angle afterwards.
So
right?
the angle's set with that arm instead of with the...
With the arm, not
Yeah.
with this.
Yes.
Yes.
So there's no specific length sticking.
Absolutely.
Okay.
But I find that personally it's easier to get things done with this as far forward as you can get it, with it still being solidly in the jig. There's this corner here. Is that a heel, or does that have a name? That corner?
Rizzolo?
The shoulder?
That's not
Shoulder.
Gary's the pro.
Rizzolo
Right.
effect, people.
The closer it is to the shoulder, thank you, the kind of easier it is to go, I find. But that might not actually be the case. It might not actually be any easier. I just always do it that way because I always have, right? So this unit comes with this angle finder, not an angle grinder. That would defeat the purpose of this machine altogether. Angle finder, that when you put it so that it is contact, first thing you do is you set your angle, right? This one's set to 25. And you make 2 points of contact on the stone, right? And then you get the chisel in there, until there's no, and you adjust the arm up and down until there's no light showing through.
You need like a third hand there, Phil.
Absolutely.
Man, I went to the
That's
zoo
why I've got
once.
it in my armpit, actually.
I went to the zoo once, and there's a spider monkey there running around with an apple, held about a metre above the back of his head by his tail. Incredible.
That's amazing.
I've always wanted-
Did he ever like bring it to and eat while he? Oh, see, I could. In my head, you said that, and my brain went straight to this monkey's climbing a tree, and he's like, "Well, oh, that sounds fantastic. That would be so good." So now we've got our beard tied up. We're not going to make any face soup. We got the angle set. Right. The handy thing about this machine is that if your previous angle was slightly out from where it is now, you can set the new angle in minutes. It's so good. All right, so you turn it on, and you'll see there's a bit of water here. You want to make sure it's pretty much as slow as you can possibly get it. Right. The slower it is, the safer it is, essentially. All right. Ooh, is there enough water in there? Yeah, there's heaps of water in there. So when you do go to put it to the stone, you want to make sure you go back and forth so that you spread out the wear mark on it, right?
Will that stone go out of shape over time?
The stone itself, no, because it's spinning, the stone itself won't go out of shape. But if you leave it sitting with water in it, if you leave it sitting in water, the stone will soak up more water in one spot than the other, which will make it not roll straight.
No, what I meant, over time grinding it, do you have to resurface or reshape the stone?
Absolutely, yeah. There is an attachment for that, the diamond truing tool. Yeah, and it's really quite straightforward, that thing. Yeah. So here we go. Now, I mentioned earlier about the speed that it's working. You really want it as slow as you possibly can. It's just safer that way. But if you are impatient and you want it to go faster, there is a speed adjustment on this thing, right?
But I've found the faster it goes, the more water it throws around, and then you'll end up with it on your crotch, and you have to go out later, and you'll have to change your pants or whatever, which would just be terrible, right? Like you see, as I increase the speed, the bead of water on here increases, and it starts throwing more water around. It's not too much of an issue on a thin blade like this, but if you're doing like a big knife, it gets everywhere, and it absolutely makes a horrendous mess.
What grit would you compare that stone to right now?
Yeah, where it's at now, it's about 200, 250, and it does actually vary a little bit, but not a lot.
What's that thing for?
This is a grading stone, really. It changes the grit on the wheel, or of the wheel, rather. It has a coarse side and a fine side, which is fantastic. You use the same grit on the wheel to put in your bevel and to clean it up afterwards. Right? We've been going a little bit on here, and it's already good to go, really. It's starting to get a little bit of a bead on there, and it's good. So the next thing you do, you want to put the finer side of the stone to the wheel. A little bit of pressure, keep it even, keep it not light, but you don't have to push down on it. You don't want to tax the motor, but just enough that you're scraping it across and changing the shape of it.
Is there a way to tell when you've graded that enough?
Yeah, I tend to literally just run my thumb along the back of the wheel here, and if it feels consistently softer, finer, then you're good to go. Some people, Gary actually pointed this out earlier, use the stone this way, right?
It just evens the wear. Because that little dressing stone will wear, and if you constantly hold it at right angles, you're going to bow it.
Absolutely.
Both ways.
Yes. Brilliant. It's fantastic.
So you do it sometimes this way and sometimes this way?
Mix it up.
Yeah, okay.
Try and keep the stone as flat as possible.
Because if that dressing stone isn't flat, then you're potentially affecting your...
The dressing stones do wear out.
Can you reshape the dressing stone like on a diamond?
You could, yeah, but this stone is $8-9. It's cheap. You could flatten it out again on a diamond stone if you wanted to. If you have the stone and you live nowhere near a shop where you could buy a new, you could do that.
I think Timbecon will send you one in the mail.
Indeed, there is this thing, a truck with a guy. He'll show up at your house.
What a quick plug.
So what kind of grit are you running at now that you've graded it?
The finer side is about 600. It's not super it's not super fine. It's not your 16,000, but it is sharp enough to get you back to work, really. If that's all you care about is getting it done enough to get back to work because you're just hogging stuff out, it's great. It also will get you to 600 grit so much faster than stuffing about with all your lower grit stones for an hour and a half watching TV or whatever you do. Yeah. The main advantage of this machine over like a bench grinder is the water reservoir itself, right? You will not cook your blades. It's pretty much impossible to do it, really. Although I'm sure you could probably figure out a way if you wanted to be pedantic about it. But it is pretty much impossible to get the stone and the hot enough against the chisel to actually affect the temper in any way whatsoever.
Why is heat a problem normally?
Yeah, the process by which you make a tool sharpenable, right? So make a tool so that you can put an edge on it is called tempering. And it's this weird, long, drawn-out process of heating and cooling a blade, or a piece of steel, rather, till you get to the point where it is hard enough that it'll hold an edge, but it's soft enough to be pliable, right? To not get brittle at the end, right? Yeah.
And so a standard grinder just puts too much heat in and will burn the tip up.
Absolutely, absolutely. It's gonna throw a ton of stone at it really fast, and it'll cook it. And although it is possible to retemper your blades if you do cook them, nobody does. It's just a pain in the butt. Yeah.
So what other accessories, or what other tools can you sharpen on this machine? Yeah.
That's one of my favorite things about this thing, actually. You can sharpen just about anything. As you go on the finer one, you will work up a little bit of a bevel on the back end, or a burr rather. and you know you're sharp enough when that is consistent across the blade. And it's literally, I've gone from the beater chisel that's in the shop that we use to show people how this works to a usable, functional tool in what's it been, 5 minutes? If that?
Plus a lot of chatting.
Plus a bunch of chatting.
I've got a question here. We had an email from Richard from Ballina.
Yeah.
Ballina, New South Wales.
Where?
Hello there in Ballina.
Where's Ballina?
Richard asks, how do you compare the performance of a curved bevel, so again, what do you call it? The
Hollow ground.
hollow grind, produced by the round wheel of a whetstone, with the flat bevel made by a waterstone, like a Japanese waterstone. I mean, does it bother you that it's curved?
I've never really had an issue with it, personally, but to be fair, I don't do a lot of the fine joinery stuff with my chisels. I just hog stuff out and do fairly basic stuff. I use them to do corners in mortises and stuff. Or not mortises, but, you know, hack out
What do you
corners.
think?
Kind of personal preference, really.
Yeah.
The demonstration Patrick did using the Veritas honing jig set up the point of that chisel so that both surfaces were flat. So that still works as long as the back of the chisel's flat. The ground side can be flat or hollow. I personally like the hollow, but other people prefer it to be flat. As long as it comes to a really nice point, then you're okay.
And if you're adding a bevel, a secondary bevel, when you're honing, the cutting isn't actually happening with that curved component. Really, it's you're adding a flat cutting surface on the front of that.
Do you use Wetstone grinders?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's the fastest and kind of most convenient way to put the angle on it, right? Yeah.
In fact, the Wetstone grinder is the best thing that's happened to woodworking for a long, long time, because the dry grinding stones were fraught with danger in that the potential to overheat and lose the temper was always there.
There's actually a stropping wheel on the other side as well, or honing wheel, rather. What's the difference? Anyway, but it is the suede side of the leather up. You will know you are sharp when the burr on the back of the blade is consistent all the way across, and this machine takes that burr back out to make that angle perfectly clean and sharp enough to shave with. Because I'm handing this one off to Gary, I'm not actually going to use it on the wheel. But one thing that's very important to say, there's actually a sticker here that reminded me, conveniently enough. You have to use it the right way, right? If you go, I'm just going to take this off because otherwise it'll splash water everywhere, right? You're going to want to turn the machine around, right? And you're going to want to take this guide off and put it in this way. And the handy thing about this machine is that you can actually reset the angle just to polish your chisel, which is kind of slick. It's not necessary at all, but it's kind of cool.
So you could do the stropping just by eye. You don't need.
Yeah, you can do it freehand, but you can actually keep the angle as well if you want to do a lot of polishing work, right? If you want to get it to that mirror, in theory, you can change the angle if you do a lot of work with it, right? This machine comes with a very handy metal polish as well as that stone from earlier. But you want to absolutely make sure you go with the rotation of the machine. Here's another reason to have your beard tied up. Right? You want to make sure you're going with the rotation of the machine as opposed to against it. Right? Because if you go against it, against the rotation of the machine, this nice sharp edge you've put on your thing will cut into this wheel and absolutely destroy it. It'll hack the leather up. There is a spot on here. Where is it? Yeah, there's a bit right here where someone in a demo has put the chisel on backwards and cut into it right there. If it has a little nick like that, it doesn't affect it much. But if you do it often, then obviously you're going to ruin that, and you'll have to buy a replacement, which will be a pain where you sit down.
Thanks
Cool.
very much, Phil.
You're welcome.
Next we've got coming up Gary Rizzolo to show us the next stage of sharpening chisel, which is honing and what's the other word?
Stropping.
Which is honing and stropping. reached a very special part of the moment tonight. You'll notice we have an interesting ensemble of equipment laid out here in front of us. Some of it, I might add, we don't sell here at Timbecon, but we're open-minded people, so we'll ignore that. Melbourne-based guitar maker Gary Rizzolo is going to come onto the, what do we call this place? The Timbecon studio. Yay, Gary! And he's going to show us how to do honing and stropping.
Thank you very much, Joe.
Thanks for coming out.
Well, thank you very much, Timbecon, for having me at this sharpening demonstration. We've taken this shop damaged chisel and we've kind of resurrected it to the point where it is now beautifully hollow ground. Thank you, Phil. And we're going to demonstrate honing and stropping of this chisel. And as we mentioned, there's two ways to grind a chisel. There is the method where you use a water stone and you hollow ground the back, the chisel to a point. Or there's the method that Patrick did where he set up the Veritas jig and sharpened the chisel on the diamond stones and the water stones to get a straight point.
And John flattened the back too.
And John, of course, flattened the back to perfection, and it took ages, but he got it done really well.
Until you took over and finished it for me, yeah.
But you're not bitter about it, so it's good. Yeah.
So as I was saying, I prefer the hollow ground, and the reason I prefer the hollow ground is I like that sharper angle that you can get from hollow grinding. So when you sharpen a chisel with the Veritas jig, you set that angle at 25 degrees. When you come to hone, then you have to change that angle to more than 25 degrees, possibly 30, in order to get the burr to work nicely and get yourself a nice sharp edge. The way I like to do it is not to change this angle. I love this freshly ground surface, freshly hollow ground surface, so that when I come to the stones, I can just take the minuscule amount off the very tip so that I've got this crisp honed edge. And it's also at 25 degrees or very, very close. It might be 25 and a half. I use water which has this material in it. This is a rust inhibitor and it works really well.
Gary, where do you get that rust inhibitor from?
I got this from, I think I got this from Rob Cosman's website. Oh, okay. So a lot of this stuff that I've picked up off him. He's someone worth having a bit of a look at. So a little bit of water on there, always. Where's that clamp when you need it? Always give them a bit of a going over to make sure they're nice and flat. So the secret to this is balancing this chisel on the two edges of the hollow grind, so the back and the front. And the chisel will sit there quite nicely. And the beauty of plane blades these days is that they're so thick, you can also do this with your planes. And then just gently slide it backwards and you're just maintaining the angle that was set by the hollow grinding stone, the 25 degrees. And what we have, if you look closely at this, is two very nicely polished edges, one on the top and one on the bottom. Now what I'm going to do is, because the handle of this chisel, these stones are very thin, so I just need to slip this 4000 grit over here so the handle can hang off the edge, and I just want to touch the back just to remove the burr at 4000 grit. So we've created the burr and I've removed it from the hollow ground side and it's pushed it over to the back, and now we've just taken it off the back as
So
well.
were you able to create that burr with just those few passes that you did?
Yes.
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Is that because of the hollow grind? There's not much material to remove.
Yes, and the better it's ground, I don't know if you can see those two
Yeah, I can.
two shiny lines.
Yep.
That's it. That's enough. And we're at 4,000, so this point is getting very fine. Now we're going to go to 16,000.
16,000 years in
And
hell.
I'm going to redress this honing stone, and I'm going to use the 1,000 on the diamond. What's critical about the diamond plate is that that has to be amazingly flat. If it's not flat, you can forget all this. So it's very important that your diamond plate is as close to perfect as you can get it.
Gary, would you ever use any grits in between there? Like that seems like a massive jump.
It is a big jump.
From the wheel to 4,000 and then 4,000 to 16,000.
Don't need. Yeah, it's not sanding wood. It's metal. You know, when we work wood, we try and keep the grits close together so we can remove the scratches and get there. This is, look, the scratches are kind of gone.
Yeah, right. We just polish.
Your grinding on that stone, you know, around 600 is probably more like 1,000, realistically.
Yeah.
So you've jumped from 220 to 1,000, and I've jumped from your 1,000 to 4,000, and now really this doesn't do much. What this does is polish.
And it adds bragging rights.
And it's the polish that I need that maybe you don't.
Are you saying your work is better than ours?
No, what I'm saying is...
You know I'm better than you guys. I've got a bloody luthier.
What I'm saying is
maker.
that
Luthier.
I need the back of my chisel to be a mirror.
Wow, that is shiny.
Yeah.
Is that just a vanity thing? So you can check yourself out?
You check your teeth. That little moustache going
Just a
on.
minute. Hold the foot.
That's awesome.
And I'll show you why I need that mirror a little later on. But first of all, let's look at this, polishing this chisel with our lovely 16,000 grit. So again, we're going to balance that honed edge, that ground edge, sorry, which has been honed at 4,000, and to balance it, just pull it back. So the pressure I'm applying is kind of downwards. I'm balancing the chisel with my finger, and that's allowing me enough grip just to pull it backwards.
I also notice you're moving, your arms and your body are kind of staying at the same angle. You're moving your body.
Swaying my body.
Yeah.
That
From your
helps
legs?
maintain the angle, doesn't it?
Like
Gary's
a
just
dancer.
one big jig now, you see.
Yeah, that's it.
It's the Rizzolo
So-
sharpening guy.
It's really expensive.
And there's only one.
So now we're just going to polish the back a little bit. And
So Gary,
we're just about done.
3 or 4 passes you did is enough
Yeah,
to do this, yeah?
yeah.
I think I've been spending too long on mine.
Absolutely too long on the chisels.
That's, to me, that's quite nice. It's almost a mirror on those two little lines. And so that will be nice and sharp.
See, when you say mirror, it's a mirror on the
There's a little strip
yeah.
on the bottom and a little strip on the top,
So technically
and
that's-
they are mirrors now.
But it's not a micro bevel, is it? It's still just,
Well, it is a micro bevel because it's taken the ground edge of that hollow grinding, and it's removed it now to a lovely polished line.
And it's technically added a new angle on that tip. Even though it's super slight, it is a...
The angle is whatever it is between the apex of the two.
Yeah, the heel and the tip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it'd be roughly 25.
It'd be roughly 25, and that's what I prefer.
Yeah.
So this is a really good chisel for most pairing work and a lot of general work. It's probably not the right angle if you want to bash a dovetail out. For that, you may be better off to use a chisel, another chisel that's ground to 30 degrees.
Or another thing, if you can only afford the one set of chisels, that machine is probably cheaper than a second set of quality chisels as well.
Well, so I like this fresh. I mean, that chisel now, freshly ground, freshly honed, ready for stropping, which is what we're going to do now. We'll make it ready for cutting. But the good thing about this is that you can get away with re-honing this chisel a couple more times, and then you can get to a point where, hey, it's not happening for me. Now, after that 3 or 4 sessions, now you can angle it up and set your new bevel off that one grind.
Right.
And then,
Without having to go back to the Waterstone.
yeah.
Yeah, okay.
So you would hone it another angle.
And that new angle, are you talking just a
A freehand angle that you would set your hand, lift it up a little bit, lock your wrists, and work that angle.
Yeah, and you're moving from your lower body, nothing in your upper body.
I'm moving from my ankles, really.
Yeah, right.
I'm trying to keep my whole body stiff so that my arms don't change angle.
Right.
Yeah, they're locked in, and
Forever to wrap your brain around unless
yeah, they're locked in, and the angle doesn't change. And you don't need to do heaps of work. You're only just retouching that edge. After the 16,000 grit, where we've produced these beautiful mirrored edges, we're going to now strop the chisel with Jeweler's Rouge, which I have in this little bottle. I'm not sure where this is available from, possibly Timbecon.
Is that a rouge you can wear on Friday night, Gary?
Possibly.
Pretty sexy.
Yeah. But this stuff, for me, works beautifully. So a piece of old leather here, just glued to a board, pretty standard.
And that rouge is an abrasive compound?
Eventually.
It is a very fine abrasion, yeah, really fine. So what it'll do is help us get a kind of surgical edge.
Surgical.
So number one,
Surgical.
start.
Sorry, Gary.
There's
Blank dream Varney.
we've got the chipmunks over in the corner. There's a method to this where you strop at the ground angle first. And the rule of thumb is 20 times. And I've lost count.
It happens in old
But-
age, doesn't it, mate? Yeah?
I reckon that's probably 24, but that'll do. So what you've done is just kind of any burr that's there, it's pushed it to the back. Now you can take the chisel flat on its back and just pull it towards you. And again, thank you.
10, 11, 12, 13,
I like the head ball.
16, 17,
Whoops.
19, 20.
Beautiful. And that's a chisel that will cut. I'm not sure what it's going to cut, but let's have a look. We'll grab a little piece of this.
And while you're setting up, Gary, I've actually got a question here.
Okay.
Roger from Springvale asks, whenever I hone my chisels, I tend to get rounding off of the edge. I tend to round off the cutting edge too much. How can I reduce the chance of this occurring?
Do you think he's talking about stropping?
Yes, I think he is.
Yeah, sorry, he's used the wrong word.
Yeah.
He said Roger's used honing,
Yeah.
where he's meant, I think is what he's saying, stropping. Yeah?
Yeah. I think what you've got to do is pay attention to the ground angle and not change that too much. If I lift that up, then I'm kind of polishing at a different angle and therefore creating a new little micro bevel which will start to round it over. If you want your chisel to be nice and sharp, then stick to the angles that you have.
Could you also be, I mean, because leather's so soft, if you were pushing really hard, do you think you would be creating a slight round up?
Possibly. I mean,
I don't think it'd be as lightly.
we're kind of getting into real microscopic territory here.
Yeah, sure.
And as long as it's within reason. Yeah,
what we touched on earlier with the moving from your ankles and your knees.
Yes.
That definitely applies here as well. Like keep your whole upper body from moving at all.
Probably does, Phil.
Yeah.
Yes, but I mean, I can move my whole arm without changing too much. Yeah, I'm going to change a little bit, of course. Yeah. It's all within reason, folks. So you've just got to do the best that you can, and have an ideal in mind, and aim for it. And that will help.
And keep that consistency, I guess, through the process.
Yeah. So we've got a tiny little bit of veneer here glued together. And we're just going to take the chisel and cut it. See what happens. If I had my glasses on, I could see what happens. Let's try again. It's cutting pretty nice. Beautiful. So that's slicing really nicely. Now I did talk about having a mirrored face on the back, and the reason why I like to have a mirrored face, and this chisel, available from Timbecon, one of my favourite little chisels in my toolkit. I did notice, we were talking about angles, and I did notice that this angle is very acute. It's actually 20 degrees. It's adorable. And the reason that I like it polished is that a lot of the work that I do is mitering, and if it's polished I can see in the reflection the angle of the mitre that I'm cutting. And if you come in and look at that, you'll be able to see it too. Now let us look at how sharp we can get a plane blade by shaving someone's leg. So welcome back. Now we've all agreed that we've reached the pinnacles of our career as we propose to shave Phil's leg with this blade sharpened by Gary Rizzolo. Let me introduce you to Giovanni. He's the proprietor of Miss Gertrude Hairdressing Salon in Melbourne City, and he's an extraordinary barber. And he's about to demonstrate how sharp this blade really is by having a hack at that forest. Awesome.
Good luck, Phil. Okay.
Ba-da-da-da-da.
We're going to start with some lather, Phil.
All right.
First a lathering.
How's that feel, Phil?
Nice. You can come by anytime.
So you want me to tell your...
Safety first, kids.
No.
All right, you ready, mate?
Sure.
This is exciting.
I probably shouldn't do that.
Sound effects.
Super sharp knife on my leg.
No, don't scare anyone.
Is there an important artery in there, anybody?
Oh, is that smooth?
Oh, look at that.
How's it going?
Holy crap, that tickles. Is that weird?
Look at that.
Do you need more lather?
Yeah, possibly.
Lather him up. Let's lather him all over.
Buy me dinner first.
Oh, this is very smooth.
Oh, gee, your legs are heavy.
I knew this is how this is gonna go. I would've
You
brought
need
some
to come more regularly to Giovanni's.
You think that's furry? You should see my face.
The hairiness is only temporary, John.
That's a great shot. Did you see?
Wow.
Where do you want me to stop, man? My
The
neck.
ankle.
My neck.
Is this breaking your? This is breaking your no shaving in 500 days situation.
Yeah. No, that only applies to the beard.
Man, that's going to be itchy tomorrow.
Amazingly sharp, Gary.
That's amazing.
You're gonna throw away all your
Good.
There's
barber.
zero,
What do you call them? There's razors.
Yeah. John, they're saying it's sharp, John. 16,000 grit, they're saying it's sharp.
It's definitely sharp.
Awesome.
It's amazing. Like there's no scratching or any proportions on my leg at all. Wow, Gillette.
No.
I think you're done, mate.
Congratulations to you, 90.
Hello again, everybody. I'm just going to do a quick little, I guess it's a plug, but it's for a product that I am using myself and I really like it. It's the Freud range of blades, of cutting tools. They do saw blades and router bits, and Timbecon have kind of only recently started bringing them in. So I had the pleasure of trying out a whole range of their industrial saw blades. I have them all in my shop, and it's all I use anymore. They have been phenomenal. They're incredibly sharp. They're just absolute weapons. They look great, but fundamentally they just cut perfectly. So there's a couple of important features that make these blades high quality professional tools. Freud produced their own tungsten carbide. Now, most cutting tool companies for router bits and saw blades, they'll just contract another company to produce the tungsten for them.
I think a lot of them import from Asia as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what that means for Freud is that their quality control is absolutely top notch, and they can also experiment with different grades of tungsten for different cutting tasks, which means the tungsten that they're using is perfectly designed for the job that it's, for the actual tool that it's on. So this is a general purpose industrial blade. They have really chunky carbide teeth, which means you have a lot more sharpening potential, so you get a lot more life out of one of these blades than you would, a cheaper blade. With the Freud industrial range in their saw blades, the tungsten teeth are about 3 times the size of a lot of other comparable blades on the market. So that means there's more tungsten on each tip. What that means is you can actually take this blade to get it sharpened more times. So the blade stays sharp for a long time because it's a really high quality tungsten, but it also means that I can probably get 20 sharpens out of this one blade. And so for me that's an advantage because I'm not going and buying new blades all the time. And that's why, a professional quality industrial blade like this is more expensive, but it is far outweighed by the economy of the ability to sharpen it more times than a less expensive blade.
It's like buying a good quality chisel.
Yeah,
a good quality chisel stays sharp for longer.
Lots of good quality tiny chisels.
Yeah. I don't think you can get a false tooth done out of carbide.
Sure.
Probably could.
It'll be expensive, but you got enough money, you can get someone to make anything.
Freud also have a extensive range of really high quality router bits. Now, I use just an insane variety of router bits because I'm always doing weird custom jobs that require different shapes. And so I find with these premium quality router bits, I'm not replacing my entire range because that would cost me a literal fortune, but I replace the blades that I use most often with these really high quality professional tools because I get really good life out of them. They have an incredibly sharp cut, and that means that I'm getting less tear out and higher quality cuts on products, which means less hand sanding or less finishing afterwards. If it's some weird little profile that I'm only going to use once and it's going to sit in the back of my cupboard, I might not spend the money and get the absolute premium quality cutting tools like these ones here. But for the things that I use most often, I'm absolutely going to justify the expense of these Freud tools. And in head-to-head comparisons with a huge range of other router bits, the Freud blades routinely end up as, the best that money can buy. And in my experience, I've really enjoyed using them, and they're certainly sharp.
On the saw blade there, it seems to have a grainy surface on the blade. What can you tell us about that?
I know Freud used a really specific, like, low friction coating on the surface, so that means less heat in the blade, less opportunity for the blade to potentially warp due to that heat, and less friction when you're making cuts also means that it's easier to pass timber through. So they call it ICE. It's some patent coating that they have designed, and that's on all of their industrial blades. You'll also notice that it has a range of these expansion slots, so that's really common in high quality blades. Freud actually resin fill their internal ones on their big industrial blades, and that allows the blade to expand and contract as it needs. That's again to allow that expansion to happen cleanly without presenting any warping in the blade. And by resin filling those slots, it means that those little slots are less likely to, I guess, hum and vibrate or introduce any of those resonant hums that you might get from, what is essentially a large cymbal.
How do their non-industrial blades compare to other ones in the market?
I actually did a video comparing their industrial range with their own sort of general purpose range, and their general purpose range was an exceptional cut. It was really stunning. So they do have a range that's less expensive than their giant industrial blades, and I've found them to be like fantastic, really good. They have a similar sort of non-slip coating. Their carbide teeth aren't as big, so you're not going to get quite as much life out of them. They're not quite as thick, so there is the chance that you will get a little bit more vibration, which is why, I can still justify and need industrial blades, but their general purpose blades are still phenomenal.
Right. Good. Patrick, we've got a message from Peter in Queensland, so let's see Peter's question.
Hello, my name is Peter. I'm from the Nerellan Men's Shed. I would like to ask the Timbecon live panel whether the Freud blades are compatible with the saw stop. Thank you.
So thanks for your question, Peter. Patrick, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, look, as long as you've checked that the blade fits on the machine, and also it's really important with saw stop to make sure that you know if the blade is an imperial or metric size, so that you can check the clearance between the blade and the brake mechanism to make sure that that is set up correctly. I also believe that there's a way of testing if the saw stop stopping mechanism is working. Is that correct?
Yeah, so what you can do is if you fit the blade to the saw stop, and then you can switch to bypass mode on the switch box, and actually the saw will give you a green light which will tell you whether the saw is compatible with the saw stop. You guys had experience with that? Yeah?
Not as much with the saw stop, no.
Yeah, there's a bypass mechanism just to test. People use the same mechanism with certain materials like aluminium backed board. You can bypass the mechanism, but just in this sense use it for testing. And the saw stops are designed to deal with different types of blades because they actually come with two riving knives. So if you've got an imperial blade versus a metric blade, you can change the riving knife to accommodate that. So Peter, I think the consensus is that yes, you can use Freud blades quite easily and safely on a saw stop table saw.
Yeah, you might cry a bit if you trip the brake though and ruin the blade. Cry all the way to the bank to buy a new one. But yeah.
Oh, I think
you'll be able to count to 10.
Yeah.
Or 21 with no pants on.
But that's a key point because from my experience with saw stops, which is reasonably limited, but I do know that if you've got a high quality blade that the brake captures, if it is a high quality blade, you can actually peel that the aluminium brake component off, and the blades can be still intact. Right. Some of the cheaper blades, you might find that you'll lose a tooth or so. Yeah. But it may be possible to salvage that blade. So
sweet.
Well, I'll hand back to John.
Oh, okay. Well, we've come to the end of the first live episode of Timbecon Live. I'd like to. I've had some fun. Have we had some fun, guys?
I've had 6 out of 10 amount of fun.
Nice. How much pizza have we eaten?
6 out of 10.
Plenty, yeah. We'll have the pieces available. So a very special thank you to Patrick Holcombe.
Thanks for having me.
Phil Shinbine, and of course Gary Rizzola down the end there. Gary, well, thanks for coming up, giving us your time to make this program. My name's John Madden. I'm glad you watched our program. We hope that you've enjoyed it. We'll have another crack at it, see if we can make it better next time. But not this time, I'm sure it's completely perfect. But until then, stay safe, get woodworking. Thanks for watching Timbecon Live.